welcome to today's deep dive. We have a really fascinating mission today.
I do. It's a big one.
Yeah, we are exploring a truly radical framework for, how we actually view young people in our communities.
Right.
We're going to examine the hidden knowledge and agency that they possess and basically completely redefine the role of youth workers in our society.
Which is such a profound shift in perspective. Because whether you are, a parent, an educator, a policymaker, or just like a regular citizen participating in your local neighborhood.
Yeah, just living your life.
Exactly. Understanding how our community treats its youngest members isn't just some niche issue. It is the ultimate litmus test for the health of the entire world you live in.
So true. And the grounding material for our deep dive today comes from a 2025 blog post by Steve Walker. It was published in the Youth Work Common Room.
Yeah, great piece.
It's titled, Young People as an Indicator Species, Rethinking the Social Contract Through Youth Work. And this piece actually emerged from a really intense, ongoing discussion among UK youth workers.
Right. Mostly about anti-discriminatory practice, I think.
Exactly. And about how youth are structurally excluded from the very society they are, fully expected to inherit. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because we need to start with this incredibly striking concept. You ever watch those nature documentaries where they talk about, a specific type of frog in a rainforest?
Oh, yeah, the ones with the really bright colors.
Yeah, exactly. So if the frogs in a certain pond start disappearing, or if they stop growing, the scientists don't just stand there with a clipboard and say, well, it's a bad year to be a frog.
Right. They don't blame the frog.
No, they don't say the frogs really need to pull themselves together and work harder. The scientists immediately start panicking about the entire pond.
Because frogs absorb their environment directly through their skin. I mean, they are highly sensitive to microscopic changes in, the water chemistry, the temperature, the soil. In ecology, an organism like that is called an indicator species. So their presence, their absence, or just their overall well-being reveals the holistic health of the entire ecosystem.
Right. So the pond might look perfectly fine to our human eyes, but the frogs are effectively screaming that something under the surface is, fundamentally toxic.
Exactly. And Walker takes this exact ecological lens and applies it directly to human society.
Which is such a cool way to look at it.
It really is. He argues that teenagers and young adults are the indicator species for our communities. We have to stop looking at young people in a vacuum.
So we use them as a diagnostic tool.
Right. We have to look at their well-being as a reflection of the health of our broader SEP systems. That stands for our social, economic, and political systems.
Okay, let's break down how those systems actually interact. Because I think it's easy to hear socioeconomic and just, tune it out as academic jargon.
Oh, for sure. Sounds like a textbook.
Yeah. So how do those three things, mechanically fail a young person?
Think of it as a domino effect. Let's say there's an economic failure in a community. Maybe a major factory closes, or inflation just far outpaces local wages.
Right, something big.
Yeah. That economic stress immediately fractures the social system. Parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. They're highly stressed. After-school programs lose their funding.
And the community spaces where people gather probably start to board up, too.
Exactly. And that resulting social isolation breeds political apathy. The community feels entirely left behind by the people in charge.
So by the time a 15-year-old is, acting out or completely disengaging from school, they're basically sitting at the end of that falling line of dominoes.
That is the diagnostic test. If you have a community where young people are blossoming, where they are actively engaged, where there's a clear structural focus on equality and diversity, that evidence signals a community that has really strong social cohesion. The ecosystem is healthy. But if the evidence points to high rates of youth unemployment or widespread mental health challenges.
Well, very clear social exclusion.
Right. That isn't just a youth problem. It proves that those broader structures, the economy, the social safety nets, the political representation, are entirely failing.
The ecosystem is toxic.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a massive contradiction in how we currently handle things. I like to think of young people as the check engine light on your car's dashboard.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. If you're driving down the highway and that red engine light starts flashing, you don't grab a hammer, smash the light on the dashboard, and, blame the bulb for being broken.
No, you definitely don't.
You pull over, you pop the hood, and you look at the engine.
And yet, society's default reaction is to grab the hammer. What's fascinating here is that when young people disengage or struggle, we immediately individualize the systemic failure.
We label the young people themselves as the problem.
Yes. We look at their disillusionment with politics or their struggles with traditional education as isolated behavioral flaws, things that need to be fixed within the individual.
We almost never recognize it as a symptom of a much wider societal inadequacy.
Almost never.
So if the youth are our check engine light, and they are currently flashing red in a lot of our communities, we clearly need to look under the hood.
We really do.
And according to Walker's post, the broken engine at the structural root of all of this is something called the social contract. So let's dive into that. What exactly is this contract we are forcing young people into?
Well, the social contract is an implicit societal agreement. Historically, it assumes that citizens participate in and benefit from society in exchange for taking on certain responsibilities.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, it's the bedrock of civic life. The principles are things like complying with the law, contributing economically by, getting a job and paying taxes.
And participating in civic duties like voting or community service. You do your part, society protects you, and offers you a pathway to a stable life.
That sounds perfectly reasonable in theory.
It does. But the glaring flaw that the source highlights is the criteria of this contract. Young people are heavily policed and affected by the determinants of this social contract, yet they are almost entirely excluded from actually forming its aspect.
Exactly. They have the absolute least access and the least control over what this contract contains and how it is delivered.
It's like being forced to sit down and play a complex board game where the other players started 3 hours ago, bought up all the properties, and every time you land on a space, they just invent a new rule to take your money.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it.
You are expected to integrate perfectly into a complex system that you had absolutely zero role in shaping.
And even when society makes a performative attempt to include them, the text points out a very specific reality. Consultation almost always happens as an afterthought.
I read that and immediately thought of corporate life.
Oh, yeah. How so?
It's like when you get invited to a massive strategy meeting at work, and you walk in feeling so valued, only to realize the VP already bought the new software, signed the multi-year contracts.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
And they just brought you in to vote on whether the logo on the training manual should be blue or green.
Yeah.
The blueprints are drawn, the foundation is poured, and then we invite the youth in to pick the color of the curtains.
It is the complete illusion of inclusion. We just try to fit their voice inside an existing rigid model.
Right.
And as a result, their perspectives are totally sidelined in major policy decisions, educational reform, employment structures.
Okay, I want to push back on this pretty hard, because this is where the theory hits the reality of the listener.
Okay, go for it.
I get that young people are frustrated by the rules, but wait, aren't adults the ones with the life experience to make these rules? Why should we expect young people who are still figuring things out to draft complex social policy?
This raises an important question, and it's a very common, deeply ingrained societal assumption.
Yeah, I mean, their brains are literally still developing. They don't understand macroeconomic policy.
Sure, but Walker actively dismantles this myth that young people inherently have a limited understanding. He points out a rather uncomfortable truth for us older folks.
It is.
There are millions of adults who hold incredibly strong policy views based on equally limited information.
Okay, fair point.
We arbitrarily equate age with competence, and that is a massive fallacy. Furthermore, young people possess deep knowledge, values, and beliefs that are highly considerate of wide-scale social movements.
That's true. Just because you've been on the earth for 40 years doesn't mean you automatically understand the nuances of civic infrastructure.
Exactly.
But how does living in the world translate to a teenager knowing how to fix, like, a city's zoning laws? Give me a concrete example of this atypical knowledge that text claims they have.
Okay, let's look at a neighborhood trying to get a crosswalk built near a high school. The teenagers who walk that route every single day have deep, localized, atypical knowledge. They know exactly which cars speed. They know which blind spots are dangerous at 3:00 p.m.
Oh, and they know how the ice forms on that specific corner in January.
Right. They possess a vast amount of available knowledge about the ground in which they are grown.
But they usually aren't the ones who get the crosswalk built.
Because they lack what sociologists call dominant cultural capital.
Dominant cultural capital.
Yeah,
Okay.
they don't know that to get a crosswalk built, you have to file a specific bureaucratic form in triplicate, and then you have to stand up and speak in a very particular polite language at a city council meeting.
A meeting held at like 10:00 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Exactly, a time when they are legally mandated to be sitting in a geometry class.
Oh, wow. So it's not that they lack the knowledge to solve the problem. They just lack the highly specific, adult-designed administrative codes required to access the solution.
And when they fail to navigate that bureaucratic maze, society just dismisses their knowledge as immature.
That is incredibly frustrating.
It is. But their experiential learning process gives them a master class in how structural inequalities actually feel and operate on the ground.
Right.
When we dismiss them, we are simply demanding compliance and subjugation. If we actually acknowledge their potential agency and, translate their lived experience into policy, they stop being passive consumers of society.
And they become active participants.
Exactly.
So the social contract is fundamentally broken. It's marginalizing young people, labeling them as broken when they flash like a check engine light, and completely ignoring the deep lived expertise they actually have.
That's the state of things, yes.
If the system is this stacked against them, we have to look at the people on the front lines trying to rewrite this contract on a daily basis.
You mean youth workers and informal educators?
Yes. Youth workers are the ones actually reading the indicator species signals in real time.
They are out in the field, and they are being forced to adapt to the massive failures of the SUP systems.
And there is a stark, real-world example in the text that we really need to pause on. It mentions a manifest shift in the baseline provision of youth work.
Yeah, this part was heavy.
Youth workers aren't just out there providing informal education or a safe space to hang out anymore. The text notes they are now actively having to provide meals for young people as part of their baseline provision.
It's unbelievable.
I want to linger on that for a second, because I think we can easily gloss over that as just another, bullet point in a list of social woes.
Right, just another sad statistic.
But the youth worker's job used to be running a local community theater project or a weekend sports league. And now they're literally handing out food because the kids haven't eaten since yesterday's subsidized school lunch.
That is not a subtle shift in job description.
No, that is a siren going off.
It is the ultimate proof of a depleted ecosystem. When basic nutritional needs aren't being met by the broader socioeconomic structures, the youth worker has to step into the void.
They have no choice.
But the source argues that the role of the youth worker must extend far beyond just emergency provision or passive support. It requires redefining the role entirely.
Right. It is about navigating the dynamics of power.
Exactly. The text uses this phrase, journeying alongside young people.
I love that phrase. It means the youth worker isn't the all-knowing adult handing down wisdom from the mountaintop, trying to fix the broken teenager.
No, the youth worker is a co-learner. The youth worker as a learner in the community is a crucial shift. It becomes a shared critical inquiry.
So they research the barriers together.
Yes. The adult and the young person develop strategies together. They manage the successes and they learn from the failures side by side.
Because the goal isn't just to keep the kid off the streets.
Right. The goal is to foster a lifelong, active, critical thinker who has true voice and true agency.
So how does a youth worker actually facilitate that kind of profound agency? Because the blog post outlines a progression of strategies, right?
It does, starting with the absolute baseline deep listening.
But it describes listening in a very intense way. It calls it a radical act, which, sounds a bit dramatic. How is listening radical?
Because true listening is a transfer of power. Think about the crosswalk example.
Okay, yeah.
When a youth worker invests in creating a space where a young person feels genuinely heard regarding the dangers of that intersection, the youth worker is actively defying a society that typically ignores them.
Oh, I see.
By observing and validating the personal, cultural, and structural limitations the youth face, the youth worker begins to truly challenge their exclusion.
And once you've established that baseline of listening, where do you project that voice? Because that's where the second hurdle comes in, right? Bridging the gap.
Yes, building bridges. This involves using true dialogue, which is a core informal education skill to cure intergenerational mistrust.
Because you have young people on one side with a lived experience.
And on the other, you have the decision makers holding that dominant cultural capital we discussed earlier, the people with the influence, the networks, the funding.
So the youth worker acts as the translator and the bridge builder.
Exactly. By facilitating genuine dialogue between these two groups, you force the policies to reflect the actual lived experience of the young people.
Rather than relying on a series of predetermined assumptions made by adults sitting in some boardroom.
Right. You are literally connecting the youth's knowledge of their world with the power to change it.
Which naturally leads to the hardest part of this whole framework. Once you build those bridges and look at what young people are actually achieving, you realize we have to completely reframe how we define success.
Because society typically defines success for a young person in incredibly narrow economic terms.
Did you get good grades? Did you get a job? Are you making money? Are you complying with the law?
Exactly. But within the youth workspace, educators have the opportunity to review and rewrite those metrics entirely. They illustrate alternative measures of thriving.
Like what?
Well, is the young person experiencing positive mental well-being? Have they built beneficial social connections?
Do they have a sense of active participation and collective agency in their neighborhood?
Yes. Those are the true markers of a healthy indicator species, not just a paycheck.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source makes a very explicit call to action regarding how we mentally model all of this.
The shift in modeling, yeah.
It says we need to move away from consumer and deficit-based models of thinking.
Meaning we have to stop looking at young people as broken, deficient things that need superficial, short-term, quick fixes.
Right, just so they can become good little economic consumers.
Huh.
Instead, we need to move toward asset-based modeling.
And what does asset-based modeling look like on, a Tuesday afternoon at a community center?
Yeah, how does it actually work?
It means a youth worker stops seeing a kid who is truant and rebellious and starts seeing a kid who is highly capable of organizing their peers outside of traditional structures.
Oh, wow, that's a huge flip.
It means harnessing that inherent organizational skill, recognizing their atypical knowledge, and pointing their capacity for activism toward a structural problem.
It means trusting the signals they are providing us.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what is the ultimate end game here?
Right. If youth workers succeed as co-learners, and if society actually stops smashing the check engine light and listens to its indicator species,
Yeah.
what actually changes?
The endgame is a complete reimagining of society's institutions. Advocating for policies that give young people an actual authoritative place at the table totally transforms them.
They stop being mere beneficiaries of interventions.
People who just have things done to them.
Yes. And they become active creators of responsive institutions. It is the renegotiation, the amendment of the social contract itself.
We are moving them from the audience onto the stage.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring this right back to you, the listener. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the ecological makeup of a rainforest to the structural inequalities of a civic contract none of us really signed.
We really have.
But the core takeaway is beautifully simple, and it's a diagnostic test you can run every single day.
Look closely at the young people in your neighborhood, your city, your country. Are they blossoming or are they struggling?
Because evaluating how your community treats its youth is the single most accurate way to gauge the true health of the society you live in.
Absolutely.
If the check engine light is flashing, we have to stop blaming the light. We have to start listening to the youth workers who are trying to fix the engine side by side with the youth themselves.
And we have to recognize the deep knowledge young people hold about the worlds they navigate.
So what does this all mean? It means we have a massive amount of unlearning to do. We have to unlearn the idea that age automatically equals competence.
Like it's a hard habit to break.
It is. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own that builds on everything we've just discussed today.
Okay.
If young people truly are the ultimate indicator species, and if our current societal struggles stem from forcing them into a rigid, adult-designed social contract, what would a society actually look like if its core institutions were entirely co-designed from the ground up by 16-year-olds?
Oh, man.
I'm talking about the high schools, the city councils, the public transit systems. What if they weren't just consulted as an afterthought to pick the font on the training manual, but were the ones holding the pens to draft the blueprints?
That is a wild thought.
Would it be the chaos we've been conditioned to fear? Or, would it be the most equitable, responsive, and thriving ecosystem we've ever built? Think about the pond. Think about the frogs. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.